Yeah, Dr. Clifford was the Policy and Research Director for the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. And I want to thank him for being here today. When he gets here, I'll thank him. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Kelly Tucker. Mr. Tucker is the Director of Oil and Gas Technology at New Mexico Junior College in Hobbs, New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Tucker, for traveling to Sandoval County today and bringing your lovely wife with you. Don't know if he's in the room. I don't see him, but I want to recognize Ryan Flynn, Executive Director of the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. If you're in the room, Ryan, would you stand? There he is. Okay, I didn't see him. Also want to recognize Amy Barabee. I'm not going to roll the R. Also with the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and thank her for her and Ryan for helping put together today's meeting, speakers, whatnot. Appreciate that very much. Also would like to welcome back our Director of Business Development, Diane Mays. She recently traveled to Kentucky. I don't know if she was there for the Derby, but nevertheless, she's back, safe and sound. And I'm going to say in advance, it's not official yet, but Ms. Mays is our incoming county manager who's going to replace Phil Rios, who's retiring at the end of this month, and plans to go to Oklahoma and golf and fish. I don't know why you'd want to do something like that, but
for the oil and gas.
For the oil and gas, okay, that's why. I knew there was a reason. So I want to give a little bit of the background as to why we're here today, what we're going to do today.
I couldn't help it.
There will be public comment, and those that want to sign up to address the meeting today, please do so. There's a yellow legal pad over here you can sign up on. So please do so. I was asked before the meeting started, is public comment going to be at the beginning of the meeting, which is what we traditionally do, and it is not, because today this is not a county commission meeting, this is a county commission workshop. It's a little bit different deal. And we have speakers here who have traveled from across the state to be with us today and share their expertise, and we want to have them on the schedule first, so that's what we're going to do today. Bob Wesley's here. He's going to present. I'm sorry. Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
Good morning. So a little bit about today's session and why we're doing this and so on and so forth. So this work session is a follow-up to a work session that we did as a commission last year. Why is that significant? Because last year we had 3 other commissioners on the commission, so we've had an election since then, and we have 3 new commissioners. Unfortunately, one of them can't be here today because one of his in-laws is graduating from college today, so we excused him. But we're going to capture everything on videotape so he can watch it at his leisure when he gets home. But the purpose of the meeting today is to follow up on a workshop that was held by the Sandoval County Commission last March of 2016. The purpose of the work session then was to consider the direction and the guidance for staff in regards to directions in terms of modifying, if we will, the zoning ordinance to address an oil and gas ordinance. If we choose to go forward within the amendments to the zoning ordinance, which would allow an oil and gas ordinance, that would be heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission before it would be brought before this body. During the March 2016 work session, the Sandoval County Commission was very clear in asserting and establishing these 3 things I want to share with you today. Number 1, there was no support for there being a moratorium imposed on oil and gas activities in Sandoval County. The County Commission agreed that an agreement with New Mexico Tech was desired to provide technical assistance regarding the development of our ordinance here in Sandoval County. And then thirdly, the P&Z staff was directed at that time to begin the process of developing a zoning ordinance or revision to the zoning ordinance clarifying the county's guidelines regarding oil and gas activities within Sandoval County. Staff was further instructed to develop such guidelines that provided no conflicts between Sandoval County jurisdiction and the jurisdiction of the New Mexico Oil Conservation Division. The Sandoval County Commission has received a draft of the ordinance. If you'd like a copy, just let us know and we'll get you one. I'm going to propose that today we post it on the county website. I know it's not currently posted. But we do have hard copies for anybody who would like to have one. We've got a couple of presenters today, including the Director of Planning and Zoning here at the county. There will be a question and answer session following each presenter. And our goal today, though, is to get out of here by 12 noon at the latest. The schedule is 11:30. We'd be out of here by 11:30. And I want to try and hold it in that schedule. One of the questions that I got was, will there be an opportunity for more public comment going forward? And there will be, because P&Z won't act on this until later on this month. And then the Board of County Commissioners will not take any recommendations or act on the ordinance until next month in June. So there'll be more time for public comment other than just today. Finally, please note in the agenda that at the end of the meeting, the commission, and this is really for my fellow commissioners, that we will try and develop a consensus and provide direction to staff as to moving forward in this regard. With that, if Cabinet Secretary McQueen is ready to present, we will have him come up first and make his presentation. Thank you, Mr. McQueen.
Chairman Chapman and Commissioners, good morning. My name is Ken McQueen. I serve as the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. The Oil Conservation Division, or OCD for short, is one of our 6 divisions. I'd like to introduce 3 of my colleagues who are present this morning. Matthias Sayer is our Department Deputy. David Katnack here on my right is our Division Director for OCD and serves as chairman of the Oil Conservation Commission, and Beth Wayon is our communications director. Hopefully with the 4 of us we'll be able to answer any of your questions this morning. Deputy Sayer and I both started at MNERD on December 21st of last year. Previously I worked in the oil and gas industry for 37 years, the last 14 of which were largely concentrated on the San Juan Basin, including Sandoval County. I might give a quick overview of oil and gas regulation history in New Mexico.
Could you speak louder, please? I can barely hear you.
As you may know, the first oil wells in New Mexico, both in the southeast and the northwest, were drilled in the 1920s. The Oil and Gas Act was first adopted by the legislature in 1935. The first set of rules were adopted in August 1935 by the Oil Conservation Commission. This Oil and Gas Act established the commission and focuses on the prevention of waste. And waste is defined as the inefficient, excessive, or improper use or dissipation of reservoir energy. That's the same definition that we use today. The commission was authorized to adopt rules in 10 areas focusing on drilling, spacing, operating, and plugging of the wells. The same list exists today, but it now has 22 areas for rules. The commission is also authorized to establish allowables, to pool interests, and to distinguish legal oil from illegal oil. The original act had 27 sections, including enforcement.
Oh, they're completely out.
Yeah.
Nope.
Try it now.
There you go. No. Okay.
We're back.
The commission was authorized to adopt rules in 10 areas focusing on drilling, spacing, operating, and the plugging of wells. The same list exists today, but it now has 22 areas for rules. The commission is also authorized to establish allowables to pool interest and to distinguish legal oil from illegal oil. The original act had 27 sections, including enforcement procedures, almost all of which exist today in some form. The first rules adopted in 1935 covered drilling procedures, spacing rules, casing requirements, abandonment pits, and bonding. The rules also mandated the use of several forms. Significant changes were made in 1977, which created the Oil Conservation Division as part of the Executive Reorganization Act, which also established today's cabinet departments. Today, the Oil Conservation Commission provides appellate review of OCD decisions. In 1989, amendments which provided for the legislation of domestic waste from oil and gas industry, both downstream and upstream, were added to the Oil and Gas Act. Another primary component of the Oil and Gas Act is to protect correlative rights. Correlative rights means the opportunity afforded, as far as it's practical to do so, to the owner of each property in a pool to produce without waste the owner's just and equitable share. And this definition goes on in the rules, but it basically means that every owner has the right to recover their fair share of oil and gas. Finally, the protection of freshwater aquifers in New Mexico is a key component of OCD rules. Our rules outline strict requirements for the construction of well bores so that freshwater aquifers are effectively isolated from communication with oil and gas bearing strata. Despite having thousands of wells hydraulically stimulated in New Mexico, there's not been one documented case of aquifer contamination due to fracking, and this is a reflection of our strict rules on wellbore construction. The oil and gas industry in the United States is one of the most regulated industries, and our rules are both rigorous and robust to protect the health, safety, and environment of all New Mexicans. In addition to our statutes and rules, the OCD also issues best management recommendations from time to time. Our most recent release was on Friday, May 5th, relating to gathering line maintenance and inspection. An important aspect of our rules is they are not static, but they continue to evolve with technological developments. Today we have 3 active work groups revising rules related to gas capture, horizontal drilling, and spills. The OCD rules in their entirety can be found on the OCD website. Simply type NMOCD into your search engine and click on our Rules tab. And for a complete report of the oil and gas activity in New Mexico, I'd encourage you to review our annual report, which can also be found on the EMNRD website. Last year, almost 146 million barrels of oil was produced in New Mexico, along with 1.28 trillion cubic feet of gas. Sandoval County 2016 calendar year production was almost 1.4 million barrels of oil and 12.2 billion cubic feet of gas. This ranks Sandoval County as the 5th largest producer of oil and the 7th largest producer of natural gas in the state of New Mexico. Last fiscal year, OCD conducted 49,624 separate inspections across oil and gas operations in New Mexico. OCD currently employs 53 people, and our 2018 fiscal year budget for OCD is projected at $9.5 million. During the drafting of this ordinance, OCD has met with Sandoval Planning and Zoning on at least 3 occasions. We very much appreciate the opportunity to work collaboratively with counties in crafting these types of ordinance so that we can clearly demarcate the respective responsibilities of the state and the county. My predecessor, Dave Martin, developed the New Mexico Energy Policy Plan in 2015. One of its key tenets was state and county cooperation. We have not attempted to rewrite this ordinance, rather we have simply tried to identify state responsibilities and remove them from the ordinance. From the standpoint of an operator, a stable and consistent regulatory framework is critical. Reliable cycle times for permit approval is also a critical element. OCD consistently reviews and approves APDs, that is the permits to drill, in 10 days or less. We have encouraged your planning and zoning team to consider a mechanism that allows your county permit to process concurrently with the state APD rather than one after the other. County should play a significant role in considering setback distance between homes and drilling operations. Numerous examples exist of oil and gas operations coexisting in populating areas, including Los Angeles, Oklahoma City, Farmington, and Hobbs. More importantly, and often overlooked, counties and cities need to make sure that the housing developments approved around existing wells do not encroach on established setbacks. County regulations should ensure that real estate and other developments respects setback requirements pertaining to both operating and abandoned wells. Lastly, while we've not tried to change the structure of this ordinance, there may be other alternatives which prove easier to implement and maintain. A permit by rule might be one example. Thank you for your invitation to comment on your ordinance this morning. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ken. Secretary McQueen. I want to first open it up to the commission if they have any questions for Secretary McQueen.
I guess just, do we have a copy of your presentation that might be available to us?
Yes, I emailed that to Makita last evening, so he will have that available for you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Hill then to forward that to the commission. Any other comments, questions? Then I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to ask Cabinet Secretary McQueen a question? We have a hand up here, Mr. Neese.
Yes, sir. So you say that there's 53 people employed by OCD?
Correct.
How many inspectors?
We have approximately four inspectors in each district office. We have three district offices, Hobbs, Artesia, and Aztec. We have at least 4 inspectors in each office, plus an environmental inspector that looks for leaks and spills.
And so how many wells are they able to inspect per day?
It depends on what type of inspection they're doing. I mean, wells are generally, if they're inspecting an area, wells are generally located close together. I personally have been a well inspector in our Hobbs office, and being that the wells are close together, you can inspect quite a number of wells on a given day if you're, just because the wells are located close together.
Okay, thank you. And then could you comment on, there was a Senate Bill 307 with regard to increasing fines and the inability of the OCD to collect on fines that were levied on bad actors. Of course, it did not get through the legislature, but can you just comment on the OCD's inability to collect on fines that are levied in the first place?
OCD has not collected fines since a court case in approximately 2009 or 2010. It was Marbob versus State of New Mexico. We do We do enforce, David, the compliance orders.
Yeah, what happened with the Marbob case is we basically lost our ability to assess administrative fines. So we can still assess fines against oil companies. We just have to go through the AG and through a court proceeding now to collect those fines.
Yes, sir, but to date, I don't think that anybody has gone through the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office says that OCD, it has to ask the Attorney General's office to do so, and OCD has not done so since 2009.
Yes, sir. I believe that we have at least one request over to the AG's office, and we're trying to staff up with a compliance attorney that's more familiar with how to do court proceedings. Actually, we're trying to get to be able to do those in-house with our own attorney. So we're trying to get to that point.
Yes, sir, but here in Sandoval County, what we would worry about is the inability of the OCD to protect us when fines are levied but not administrated over.
I think it's important to point out that even though we do not have administrative fines available today, we are still enforcing compliance actions against operators.
Oh, just one more question then too. With regard to oil conservation and the way that the law was presented and the methane emissions, wouldn't that be a waste of petroleum product for the state?
There are some reasons why there's flares go on, especially in the San Juan Basin. Mr. McQueen might be able to elaborate more on that.
I'm sorry, could you briefly restate your question for me?
Yes, sir. The law says that the OCD is required to administer over the waste of all petroleum product, and yet we flare and we waste methane. And there's within the industry, there's a major battle with regard to that administration. We would like methane to be captured instead of released into the atmosphere.
The strict definition of waste that's in our rules relates to the reservoir energy in the reservoir. So that's an important distinction. Waste is often generalized beyond what the definition is in the rules. But let me say a couple of things about flaring. Every operator in the state of New Mexico, given the option to sell natural gas, will do so. So it is not in the interest of any operator to flare natural gas because they're potentially losing revenue on that product as well. So we have two distinct issues with flaring in New Mexico. And the issue is different in the Northwest than it is in the Southeast. In the Northwest Gallup oil play, most of the hydraulic stimulation activity that is being done is utilizing nitrogen as a fluid. And by employing nitrogen in the frac activities, the operators are reducing their water requirements by about 70%. The downside to utilizing nitrogen in the fracs is that when the gases flow back, they are contaminated with the nitrogen. And none of the gathering companies will accept that product until the nitrogen level falls to a certain level. And so there is no alternative but to flare that gas until it becomes marketable. And the truth of the matter is a lot of what's going up the stack is nitrogen as well as hydrocarbon gas. So the second problem is the drill out procedures for completing the wells utilize nitrogen units, which also contain small amounts of oxygen. And pipeline requirements are very strict on oxygen contamination. In fact, typically 10 parts per million is the maximum oxygen that will be accepted into a pipeline. And so not only in the Northwest does the nitrogen content have to fall to marketable levels, but O2 content also has to fall to marketable levels. In the Southeast, it's more of a conventional play, and the nitrogen fracs are not utilized down there for a number of reservoir considerations. The Southeast, the larger problem is having adequate pipeline capacity and plant capacity to get the gas to market. And in the Southeast, because of the large expanse of federal acreage, there has been a backlog in getting right-of-ways available from BLM in order to get pipelines in place.
I have a commissioner that has a question, and then I'm going to come back to the audience. Commissioner Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time out of your day to be down here to help educate all of us on this critically important issue in our county. Can you tell me, you mentioned that you had roughly about 53 employees in your department, is that correct?
Correct.
Is that, do those employees or that number that are related to that staff permits, do you have the applicable number of people to effectively run a permit program in your department?
If you're referring to our applications for permit to drill, I believe we do. We consistently process most of our permits in 10 days. In fact, our current run rate is 90% of our permits are approved in 10 days or less.
Thank you. You also mentioned roughly 49,000 inspections. Is that correct? Is that
Correct.
about accurate? So, can you tell me what type of, when you guys go out and do these inspections, are there certain requirements that you have to meet from private industry when they're doing critical operations, when they're doing their drilling, that you have to be on site for? Can I assume that's correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell me what some of those critical operations are, please?
Some of those would include the testing of the blowout preventers during drilling operations. Some of those would be witnessing the cement job that takes place when the casing is set. Those are two that comes to mind on the drilling operations.
Then you have Then you have no notice inspections as well, where you show up on site?
That's correct.
Can you tell me the level of experience with these? Are they state employees or contractors that provide the oversight? Have you contracted this out, or is it strictly organic?
It's state employees.
State employees. Are these engineers? Are these previous field workers? What's their expertise?
We generally have engineers and geologists in our field office, but the inspection staff is generally retired workers that have worked in the oil field all their lives, and basically this is a second career for them. So that's a lot of them are that type of people.
Do you have a hard time? Are you fully manned for your inspection team, or are you short?
As far as inspectors, we're totally full right now. Yeah, we're totally manned.
Okay. Can you tell me how many wells we have in Sandoval County right now that are operational?
I don't have that number handy, sir.
We can get that.
Can you get that for me, please? Thank you, sir. Can you tell me, out of those wells that are operational, what's the closest to the Albuquerque water basin, distance-wise?
Is that about right?
Can you come back and get that?
We can ascertain that with certainty. The closest wells I have knowledge of would be in the Cuba area, but we would want to double check that.
Okay, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
and we had at the P&Z commission meeting, we had a map that depicted all that. We could provide that to the commission also.
I see it, I see the map here. But it doesn't really show the water basin. So I'm just curious on how close we're drilling to that. You mentioned that you have, can I assume accurately that water supplies here in New Mexico have not been polluted or contaminated from any fracking? Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct.
And what is your definition of contaminated or polluted?
Well, I think any degradation of the groundwater would be considered a contamination issue.
So have you had minor spills?
That affected groundwater?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we have.
When was that?
We've had some in the southeast part of the state. I can't give you the exact number, but those were basically a result of produced water being stored in unlined pits.
Okay.
But
Is there a requirement for industry to have a mitigation cleanup plan, I would assume, on site?
Correct. If we detect any groundwater contamination issue, they have to give us an abatement plan to clean up the water.
And how do you detect that? Do you go out and do soil testing?
We do.
Is that every 3 or 4 months? How do you
Well,
do that?
the OCD itself does not do soil testing. When we have a spill, we require that the operators do a delineation to determine the extent of the spill, and then we develop a cleanup plan for that spill.
Okay. You mentioned, Mr. Secretary, that this is a very heavily regulated industry. I'm curious at the federal, I'll ask you the federal level first, how many regulations are out there at the federal level, and how many departments are involved in this industry?
That question is probably better directed to a federal official, but
How about at the state level, sir?
the regs at the state level are this collection of rules that we enforce.
Are there any duplicative regulations between Washington DC and what Santa Fe has on the books?
Commissioner, the wells on federal land in New Mexico are generally governed by the BLM usually takes care of the federal wells in New Mexico. They have their own set of regulations, and some are overlapping with ours, but they generally watch those wells on federal land and tribal lands.
Okay. And the reason I ask is I was really looking for a number, so I would know, and I think the public would like to know if it's, 3,000 or 4,000 regulations that cover numerous departments at the federal and state level. The message there is it's a very serious, they take this very seriously to protect the environment, air and water, and there are no gaps, so to speak, in policy. And I was hoping you guys could maybe just give me a little bit more accurate number, but if you could find that out, I'd greatly appreciate that too.
We'll look into that.
All right. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have, Mr. Secretary. Thank you to you and your staff. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Block. I would direct you to review the draft ordinance that you received from the P&Z Commission. In there you will find the statutes that are preemptive to our ordinance that are both federal and state. Mr. Flynn, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had one question just for Mr. Katnack. Last year, Mr. Katnack, did you agree to a settlement with Oil Conservation Division for $495,000 that was approved by the Water Quality Control Commission? Do you remember that?
Yes, that's correct. It was Enterprise Pipeline. We reached an agreed settlement with them for some violations of a discharge onto the surface, and it was a substantial fine.
So the notion that you aren't able to impose penalties is actually directly contradicted by that fact that you recently as last year. And the only reason I know this was because I was the Secretary of Environment and the Chairman of the Water Quality Control Commission actually approved that settlement. But you have imposed and collected significant sums of money, correct?
That's correct, and I neglected to mention that. We do have the ability to negotiate a fine with a company if they agree to the fine. We don't have to go through court. We go through an agreed settlement, and we do have that power.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Tom, did you have a comment?
Yes, I'd just like to ask a question to clarify. Can the state also inspect well locations that are on federal lands? And so do your inspectors also, state inspectors also inspect wells that are in federal lands? So and many times there's multiple inspections, both from the federal and state level. Could you answer that question, please?
That's correct. State or OCD inspectors do inspect federal locations as well.
Okay, I'm going to allow one more question from the public because we do have public comment later on. If it's a comment, save it for them, but if it's a question for the Cabinet Secretary.
Question.
Mr. Howell?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Is the OCD aware that methane emissions are 86 times as potent as CO2 in causing heating of the earth?
Yes, sir, we are aware of that.
So what is the policy of OCD with respect to taking care of methane leaks of pipes, compressors, joints, and that sort of thing in Mexico?
Well, I can say when we do well inspections, we try and determine if there are any leaks at any of the facilities, the pipes, the tanks, the wellheads, anything like that. That's the extent that we do that.
Has the OCD submitted requests to get more inspectors, and if not, why not?
We a couple of years ago, we actually did get approval from the legislature to hire 9 additional inspectors, and we have done that. So we believe that we have adequate inspection staff at this time.
Is the cost of inspectors too high to get more than like 15 inspectors when the health and safety of citizens is concerned?
Well, the state's kind of in a budget situation now, and I'm not sure it's the proper time to be asking for more inspectors.
Thank you, Mr. Howell.
So one last thing, benzene.
Okay.
How many wells in Sandoval County have you detected benzene in the groundwater? Can you tell me about that?
Benzene in the groundwater. I'm not aware that we have detected benzene in the groundwater.
I am. I get records off of the OCD databases, and I have them at home. I'd be glad to furnish them to you. And how many settlements from oil companies for spills are you aware of for contamination and spills from these wells?
I'm sorry, settlements?
Yes, like you just mentioned, the settlement of $495,000.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that you begin, this is turning into like a cross-examination of the state regulators that are here. There's so much false information coming out that as a representative, I would feel like I have to be able to respond to a lot of these, all of the issues about methane and things like that, which the county has zero jurisdiction over. So that really takes us so far afield of what you're actually talking about today, that we would be happy to have another debate to come in and talk about methane and air quality regulations. or to talk about staffing resources and budget matters. We'd be happy to address these issues. It just seems like we're kind of going so far afield of what is appropriately a local issues meeting here today.
I agree with you, Mr. Flynn, but I also want to let you know that it is our tradition here to allow the public to engage, and we do so now. I wanted this to be a 1-2 question type thing, not an interrogation, if you will. So, Mr. Howell, do you have one more question you'd like to ask? If you do, I'll be happy to
No, I
accommodate you.
appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Now I have one more gentleman over here who has a question, and then I have a commissioner who has a question. And then we'll be moving on. Thank you.
My name is Stephen Burchinski, and I'm the co-chair of the Green Party of the Albuquerque metropolitan area. I have 2 questions. If the pipelines are not available, how much flaring time do you allow for a particular gas well to be continually flaring? Or do they shut it in inside of reasonable time, let's say 48 hours of flaring?
Yeah, our rules allow an operator to flare gas for 60 days during the initial drilling and cleanup stages of the well. After that time, the operator has to make a special request to flare additional gas, and those are approved on a case-by-case basis.
Do you know that this airshed has been close to being cited by the EPA for violating groundwater ozone standards, which would have required us to go into annual emissions testing for all of our vehicles?
Yes, sir. We're aware of the problem in the San Juan Basin.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have a question for Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. The question I have is that I'm sure that you have a policy and a procedure that follows for your inspection. Is there any possible way that we can see your policy or your procedures that follow your inspections of pipeline?
Inspections for pipelines?
Well, actually for the oil well drilling, I'm sure do you have a policy that follows the procedures, how it's inspected?
Yes, sir. It depends on the various type. There's various types of inspections that we do on a well during drilling. Plug-in wells we inspect, things like that. So there's probably a multitude of different procedures and policies that we use.
Is that the same one that your inspector follows?
Yes.
Is that a sheet that he looks at and says, okay, I gotta look at this? Is it possible that we can get a copy of that to see how it's inspected?
Sure, we can provide that to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. I want to thank Cabinet Secretary McQueen for taking time out of his day to come here and visit with us in Sandoval County. Appreciate the presentation. If you can make that available to us, that would be great. Thank you for your time, and have a good week.